بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Today we begin and hopefully finish the manzila of al-Riyadah, the station of exercise. Yes, exercise. And it's exactly as you are thinking of. As we exercise our body, we do that to keep our bodies healthy and strong. Likewise, the spiritualists of Islam, they took this concept and applied it to our spirituality. In other words, in order for our spirituality to be strong, we need to, do proper exercises to strengthen it and keep it strong. And if we get lazy and we stop exercising, then you can imagine that it's going to weaken our iman. So the same concept here. And Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayh says that Riyadah al-Nufus, exercising one's spirituality, is exercising the self into becoming more honest and more sincere. So spiritual exercise is regarding one's honesty and one's sincerity. Right? And we'll explain that inshallah as we go on. So Abu Ismail al-Harawi rahimahullah ta'ala says, الرياضة هي تمرين النفس على قبول الصدق, is training oneself to accepting al-sidq, accepting the truth. Here sidq is used as the truth. And he means two things by this. The first thing that's meant is exercising ourselves to being more truthful in our speech and our actions, right? So honesty is not something that is exclusive to our speech. Honesty is also something that is applied to our actions, right? And to give it another a deeper meaning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. O you who believe, why do you say that which you don't do? Right? And the phrase in English, do you practice what you preach? Right? Or the other one is, if you're going to talk the talk, then walk the walk, or however it is. Right? So even us people outside Islamic religion, they have this notion of making sure there's consistency between what we say and what we do, right? So that requires an amount of exercise because talk is cheap. I'm throwing all these euphemisms and these idioms around. Talk is cheap. Anyone can say, yes, I am a strong believer. Yes, I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Anyone can get on the pulpit and start mentioning the Prophet's hadith and verses in the Quran and, oh, you who believe, be just people, and oh, you who believe, say the truth and be kind to one another. But when push comes to shove, it's not always as easy as it's made out to be. Why? Because that requires practice. It requires exercise. The second thing that's meant by this, meaning accepting truth, is تطبيق ما صدقه, is applying what you believe in. Right? So there's the manifestation of truth in speech and actions, and the other one is believing or acting upon what you believe in, right? So we believe in Allah, we believe in the Day of Judgment, we believe in the Messenger, right? That's something all Muslims do. Anyone who is a believer believes in these things, right? But there's really no comparison there. However, how are people's application of what they believe in? I believe in Allah, right? But how much has that transformed your own self? How much has your belief in the Quran or our belief in the Quran affected our character? This is a type of spirituality that requires exercise. Again, it's easy to say, I believe in Allah and His messengers. Every Muslim reveres Allah and His messengers, right? And reveres the Quran. Even a non-practicing Muslim, if they are holding the Quran, they will hold it in reverence and awe, right? But, how many actually apply it? That's what we're talking about here. And this requires exercising one's spirituality. No one is just going to pick up the Quran and say, yes, I believe, and they're 100%, practicing everything in Islam. That's just not the way it works, right? That's human nature, and that's quite natural. Even the companions, when you look at the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, and you compare them, right? When Islam was first revealed, or the Quran was first revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, look at the companions when What was revealed of the Quran was Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. These first few verses, and the opening verses of Surah Al-Muddathir and Al-Muzammil and Surah Al-Duha, when there was probably 100 verses, not even 100 verses revealed. Look at them then and compare them to when the verse Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum was revealed. Today I have perfected your religion, right? Compare the two. Are they the same? Of course not, right? There is this gradual increase, and that requires this exercise. And they had a rigorous form of exercising that was directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether that included being persecuted in Mecca, being exiled from their tribes, being excommunicated from their tribes. They used to call them, the disbelievers of Quraysh used to call them as-Sabi'een, right? Which pretty much means those who left us, right? So they were exiled by their families and excommunicated by their families, which still occurs in the lives of many people who revert to Islam, right? Especially those who come from white background, Caucasians, right? Because they see it, accepting Islam is like a cultural apostasy. It's difficult for them, right? So this still happens today. That's a type of training and exercise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this person in order to strengthen their iman. For the early companions during Mecca, it was an obligation upon them to pray Qiyam al-Layl. Night prayer was an obligation upon them, right? And some scholars held the view that it remained an obligation on the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because it's a rigorous type of training. If you want to strengthen your iman in the quickest possible way, then pray at night. Because, man, it does wonders for you. Number one, you're sacrificing your dear sleep, and sleep is very dear to us, right? In a time when it's quite normal to sleep, right? You're sacrificing a little bit of, especially if you work afterwards, right? You're losing an hour of sleep for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That goes a long way, right? And it exercises the self. And prayer in general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَخَلَفَ مِن بَعْدِهِ خَلْفٌ أَضَاعُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَاتَّبَعُوا الشَّهَوَاتِ فَسَوْفَ يَلْقَوْنَ غَيًّا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after talking about the prophets and their characteristics in Surah Maryam, He says that after them came generations who left prayer, right? They weren't honoring their prayer or consistent in prayer, and they followed their desires. So one asks the question, what is the relationship between following desires and prayer? Right? Because prayer is this type of disciplinary measure. One of its roles, it disciplines the individual. There are certain times that are dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The camera is blinking. Oh, this isn't on, that's why. We're good, all right? So one has to ask the question, or one should ask the question, Allah here is relating salah with desires and following one's whims and desires. If a person leaves prayer, they're not honoring their prayer, it opens up the doors to following desires. So if someone's going above and beyond the 5 daily prayers and waking up at night, that just disciplines the self in a way that it really subdues their desires to where they are in control of their desires, not their desires in control of them. But if someone is not sticking to prayer, right, it leads to this following of desires, because it builds this type of laziness. You know what, I'm not going to pray sunnah prayers today. What am I going to do instead? I'm going to go watch TV, right? This is what we feel this. Sometimes we feel tired, right? And man, I'm going to have sunnah prayers to pray as well. I'm going to skip my sunnah prayers today. There's nothing wrong with that, spiritually or Islamically speaking, in a fiqh sense. But look at yourself, okay, I'm not going to pray these extra prayers. What am I going to do instead? I'm just going to chill or relax or watch TV or have a bite, something like that. Again, there's nothing unethical about that. But what are we replacing our ibadah with? Following something that we desire. Whether it's halal or haram, that's different, right? But we're replacing worship with following desires. And the more a person leaves salah, the more they start following desires. Salah is a form of exercise. And waking up at night is, that's the heavy lifting. The only, people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has opened the doors of bounty and favor for them, who get up for this. In a way, you feel like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses who He wants to wake up at night, because that's a special relationship. So if Allah has given you that, you have the strength and the ability to do that, hold on to it. Never let it go. Because if one day you say, you know what, I'm going to go, I want that extra sleep, and you go back to sleep, you might not know when you'll be able to get up again for night prayer. So if Allah has blessed you with this, hold firm to it and never skip it. Also, it's a time where dua is accepted, right? The khushu' that you feel during this time is like none other, because it's peaceful, it's calm, there's nothing going on, you're not expecting anything, right? You're not in a working period, and you get the opportunity to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's just such an exercise. It really nourishes your heart, mind, and soul, your heart, mind, and body in a way like none other. So believing, going back to the forms of truth that we're looking at here, being truthful in your words and your actions, and also applying that which you believe is the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَالَّذِي جَاءَ بِالصِّدِقِ وَصَدَّقَ بِهِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُتَّقُونَ. Those who come with the truth, meaning Islam, the Quran, right? The messenger. That is the belief, the theology we believe to be true. And then believes, right, in what they believe in. What does that mean? So this is kind of the beautiful richness of the Arabic language. It means they apply that which they believe in. These or those are the people of taqwa, right? So someone who believes but doesn't apply is not a person of taqwa. They're a person of belief, right? They're still in Islam, but they're not a person of taqwa. So when you believe something, it's about applying it and living by it. That requires exercise, part of which is seeking knowledge. Right? I believe in the Quran. Okay, well, can you tell me what you know about the Quran? You know, I can't go beyond a few words. Okay, fine. We all start somewhere, right? But in order to exercise, a form of exercise that you need now is to learn. And that requires discipline. That every week you come, or you start replacing certain things. Instead of listening to the radio on your commute to work, or when you go out and run some errands, you replace that with listening to a lecture or a talk, right? That requires a type of exercise. And it's not always easy on the self, right? So this is what we're talking about here. And Abu Ismail al-Harawi rahimahullah ta'ala says, وَهِي عَلَى ثَلَاثِ دَرَجَاتٍ رِيَاضَةُ الْعَامَّةِ. And there are three levels of this, and this is his standard structure. Any station he talks about, there are three levels. The average Muslim, right? The average Muslim who's on the path to Allah, and then the above average, and then the above and beyond, right? The exceptional believers. So Riyadatul Amma, the average form of exercise, is تهذيب الأخلاق بالعلم وتصفية الأعمال بالإخلاص وتوفير الحقوق في المعاملة. There are three things. Again, three levels. Each level has three things. And what's interesting is that today, when you look at public speaking and whatnot, 3 is the magic number, right? You always want 3. It just sticks in the mind. I don't know why. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. And it seems like they recognized this even 700, 1,000 years ago. 3. 3 stations, or 3 levels, and each level has 3 elements. The first element is تهذيب الأخلاق بالعلم, is perfecting your manners through knowledge. So manners isn't always easy, right? For us, it's easy to say please and thank you, right? We heard this in school, right? Please and thank you, because they're the magic words. If you want nice things to happen, then they're the words that should be heard, right? I memorized this from Barney when I was 3 years old, because they drill it in your mind. You know, the golden rule: do unto others what you want done to yourself, or if you have nothing nice to say, then don't say anything. These are prophetic statements. The Prophet ﷺ said it, and Isa ﷺ probably said it as well. That's where they're getting it from. But it's not always easy, because when someone comes, right, and tells you off for absolutely no reason, because they're having a bad day, right? Well, what's your response? Oh, I'm going to get you good. That's the natural response, right? But what is the prophetic response? You know, the example of the Prophet ﷺ is many, especially with the Bedouins, who are rough and stern people. They were like that by nature. One Bedouin enters and calls the Prophet, Ya Muhammad. I mean, it didn't mean any disrespect, but to us, you know, how dare you call the Prophet ﷺ, you know, in that way? At least say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. You know, don't call the Prophet ﷺ the way you call each other. You say, oh, so-and-so. Or you call, hey, so-and-so, you know, listen. You go to the Prophet ﷺ with utmost respect, because that's part of Iman. So he said, Ya Muhammad. And he grabbed the Prophet ﷺ by his gown and pulled him back very violently, right? To the extent that it left a mark on his neck. It bruised his neck, right? And then the Prophet ﷺ looked at him, and what do the Bedouin want, right? It's not an urgent matter. It's not, the army, an enemy force is coming, right? He said, "Ya Muhammad, give me some money," right? Now, let's be honest. If this happened to any one of us, right? If it's a guy, he's probably thinking about punching him in the face, something like that, or if it's a woman, maybe slapping him with a purse, right, or her hand. Then this is what's going to come to our mind, because what are you doing, right? You transgressed against me, right? What did the Prophet ﷺ do? Smiled and said, "Give him money," and that's it, right? Now that's not easy on the self. That's not easy at all, right? And that requires the exercise. So, perfecting our manners and characteristics with knowledge. And then this is it, through knowledge. Because without knowledge, right, people do very, very, very silly things, right? And they call it, with beautiful names. Now, the Super Bowl halftime show, right? This is the talk of the hour in the Muslim community. I don't watch the Super Bowl. I've never been into sports. Nothing wrong with watching it. But you hear all of this. And scrolling through YouTube today, NFL channel, and they bring the halftime show. They posted it yesterday. It has 66 million views, right? 66 million views. Now, I have an idea of what's going on based on what I read. So I just looked at it for a minute. And it's just dancing galore, right? Dancing galore by these ladies. And what is it called? Female empowerment, right? Female empowerment, right? And this is one of the tricks of, one of the fallacies and the tricks of consumer culture. Right? Now, Noam Chomsky has a very interesting analysis of this. He pretty much says that the elites have a goal. The elites, he means by this those who are giving the orders, right? Those who legislate law. And to him, that doesn't mean the Senate, and that means the corporations, because they're the ones paying these legislators, and they're the ones who are acting on behalf of the corporations, not on behalf of the citizens, right? And he says that the goal of these elites is to concentrate wealth, because concentrated wealth means concentrated power. Money is power. Very simple idea here. And democracy is the greatest threat to them. Democracy is the greatest threat to them, because democracy gives power to the average citizen and gives them a voice, right? And that contradicts the goals of these major corporations who want to concentrate power, right? And he says that one of the ways, and he says in the 60s and the 70s, the awareness of the average American about what's going on in politics, about the realities of society, people were a lot more aware. Right, the revolutions of the 60s and the civil rights movement and whatnot, this created a type of awareness in the mind of the average American that was concerning to these elites, right? That gave the average citizen enough knowledge and capacity to challenge these elites and to question them. Now, the elites don't want to be questioned. So what do? In the 70s, they created what's called the consumer culture, where it's about getting these individuals just to consume. So instead of the 15-year-old teenager, instead of going to the library for recreation, they go to the mall to buy some things, right? He says that this is something that's not random. It was made, it was created. And he calls it manufacturing consent. He has an interesting book that I'm looking forward to reading. So when you look at advertisements, they started to change. Right? It's very funny. Look at the commercials in the 70s and the 80s. And even to an extent till this day. It's not about presenting information to the consumer. Right? Adam Smith, or one of the other economists, the well-known economists, he said that either capitalism or a strong economy is one that informs the consumer so that they have the ability to make rational decisions. Right? Now, these elites, they don't want that. They don't want consumers to make rational decisions. They want to disinform consumers so that they make irrational decisions. So when you look at commercials, it's always about the cool thing. right? It's not about saying this is our product, you should buy it, right? This is what our product offers you. It's about this product is cool. And if you have this product, you're a cool person, right? This is how it is. Look at the commercials. They play on cultural sensitivities, right, in order to attract the emotions of the consumer, to make these irrational decisions. And by doing that, you're just making a society that's very ignorant. So when the spiritualists talk about manners need to be built off knowledge, so that people can't be swayed left and right, right? They are informed about the decisions they're making. They understand why when someone comes and tells you off or cuts you off on the road, right, why you should smile instead of screaming and flipping them off, right? Why you should do that. It's not just the Prophet ﷺ did it. That's good enough, right? But the Prophet ﷺ acted based on wisdom. Based on a vision. There's somewhere that the Prophet ﷺ is going and taking these people, and that is their guidance. That is, instilling mercy in the minds and the hearts of the average citizen. Again, Noam Chomsky says that America is afraid. Americans are afraid, right? They're just afraid of all the gun culture and these gated communities and whatnot. It's just a sign of fear. And this is something that's not old. It's actually quite recent. And he says that when he was 12 years old, he used to take the train to New York City, spend the entire day in downtown, and go home at the age of 12. Now, if my son is 12, I'm not going to let him go to LA in a train. Heck no. No one would, right? Because there's that fear. But he says some part of that fear was intended, it was created to make people afraid. So when we look to manners and ethics, our manners and ethics must be built off knowledge. And today the challenge is knowledge versus culture. A lot of Muslims, unfortunately, they're accepting culture, right? And they're trying to, present Islam in a way that satisfies American culture, right? We need to act this way because that's just a cultural thing to do. Now take, for example, trigger warnings, right? Now, when you were in college, when I was in college, there's no such thing as trigger warnings, right? And trigger warning, you probably don't even know what it is, right? A trigger warning is basically informing the reader or the listener that certain things will be said that might make them feel uncomfortable, to give them the opportunity to leave, right? Okay. Now, you can understand, when we used to watch videos on TV or whatnot, or movies on TV, it said viewer discretion is advised, right? Fine. And there's because of violence, language, whatever. But now, topics like abortion must have a trigger warning prior to that. Topics like gender, you need a trigger warning before that. These shouldn't be offensive topics, right? And even Noam Chomsky, who's an intellectual and a professor, he was at MIT, I think now he's at University of Arizona. The reason why I'm mentioning him a lot is because I listened to his a few of his lectures over the last 2 days, so a lot of his thoughts are on my mind. He even criticizes this. He says what this does is it limits freedom of speech, right? And it's one guy told me at a recent Muslim convention or forum, right? They had literally buttons you can press, and it informs the speaker that someone has been triggered, right? And it said that one person got up and people started pressing the button because they were triggered by his presence or her presence in the audience, right? They were offended that this person is even here. This is dangerous, right? And this is not built off knowledge. In fact, this is built off a devilish type of view of the world, right? It's very arrogant. You don't have the right to speak because you offend me, right? You can't have an opinion because your opinion offends me. It's about me, right? And if you don't satisfy my ego, right? If you don't tickle my ego, then I'm going to take you off the podium. That's not only dangerous in terms of spirituality, it's also dangerous in terms of freedom of speech and knowledge, education, right? If someone presents a topic or presents an opinion that you disagree with, what is the way to deal with that? Well, create another discussion that presents another view, This is mature conversation. This is the way societies are built. But these trigger warnings, that's the way you foster tyranny, right? And selfishness and egoism, etc. So Islam has spoken a lot about manners, about ethics, and you have tens, if not hundreds, of verses and hadith that talk about manners and whatnot. And this is something that we need to learn, right? Not just enjoy listening to, oh my God, the Prophet ﷺ, mashallah, brought a tear to my eye. Good. It should bring a tear to your eye. It's beautiful. But we need to understand, the vision behind these manners. And the scholars said that, one scholar said that I learned knowledge for 20 years and I learned manners for 40 years, right? And scholars would look for teachers whose manners were very clear, right? They had very, very strong manners. Why? Because, the fruits of knowledge, the fruit of knowledge is application. And if Islam came to, as the Prophet ﷺ says, جِئْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, I've come to perfect, the best of characters and best of manners, right? That is one of the goals of the Prophet ﷺ. So as we learn, we need to transform our characters, and that is through knowledge. Also, if you look at scholars, for example, I'm talking about actual scholars, not people who know a few things or know a lot of things, but actual scholars. The way they talk, the way they present themselves, you have this humbling personality in front of you. You have this personality that's very mature, right? They're very proper in the way they talk, right? They're very, to the point. They don't talk about nonsense. They don't make, ridiculous jokes that, don't need to be said. And that is one of the fruits of knowledge, is that it really perfects your personality and your character. The second element of this level of exercise, spiritual exercise, is tasfiyatul a'mali bil ikhlas, is purifying your actions with sincerity, right? And again, sincerity isn't something that a person is born with or isn't born with, right? Sincerity is something that you develop and you build, and that requires an amount of exercise. Why? Because it is not always easy. So we look at our sincerity here. Let's define it first. Sincerity, according to Ibn Qayyim, or according to Abu Ismail al-Harawi, هي عبارة عن توحيد المراد, right, is unifying your intention, your will, with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, I am doing what Allah wants me to do. Right? I am doing what Allah has willed for me to do, what He commanded me to do. That's how he defines ikhlas. So when we look at our actions, we are asking ourselves, why am I doing this? Is this what Allah wants me to do or no? Right? And again, that requires an amount of knowledge. In fact, that requires a lot of knowledge in order to be able to, navigate through the nuanced details. It's not always clear. There's a lot of gray area that needs to be navigated. But the more knowledge a person has, the more they're capable of navigating that terrain and doing what's best or what's most pleasing to Allah. Right? Now, if a person has two options, and both options can be permissible, and Islam didn't really talk much about it, it's not too concerned with it, but two actions, one is going to be more pleasing to Allah than the other. Well, how do we differentiate between that? Again, that goes to knowledge. But why should we be so concerned with that? Okay, fine. It's not a big deal. It's not going to go far. But actually, it can go far. Why? Because some people ask, why do scholars talk about these very, very nuanced issues, right? These very rare issues, and they go into so much details. Or, for example, where does a person place their hands in salah? Is it above the belly button or under, or do they leave their hands dangling down? And scholars will write literally a volume about this. Yeah, Ibn Qayyim has it's a smaller one, but a small volume looking at this issue. And one might say, who cares? What's the big deal, right? Well, what the big deal is the following. The Prophet ﷺ says that if someone tries to make a judgment or a ruling, right, and they make the correct judgment, then they get 2 rewards. But if someone makes attempts but makes the wrong choice, then they get 1 reward. Well, which would you rather have on the Day of Judgment? 2 rewards or 1 reward? Of course, the 2, right? So for these scholars, I want that too, because that's going to go a long way for me on the Day of Judgment. So they're doing it for a reason. It's not just making things complicated, right? They're trying to do what's most pleasing to Allah and what's most consistent with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the third element, before that, Ibn Jawzi rahmatullah alayh has a very, very beautiful way of understanding ikhlas, sincerity. And that is Ibn Jawzi. Before that, I'm putting a little bit of context here. Ibn Jawzi was he was a public speaker. And he was very, very popular in Baghdad. And Baghdad back then was the cultural center of the world. He was so popular, he was such a prominent public speaker that the kings and the khulafa and the princes would invite him. Right? That was his reputation. And he talks about ikhlas, sincerity, because this was probably a big challenge for him. You go to these, the custom was that when a prince or a king or a khalifa invites someone like a poet or an entertainer, and they enjoy what they hear, they throw them like 1,000 dinar. They'll throw them like $100,000. Right, here you go. This is our, thanks to you, right? So you could see how that can really be a problem. So Ibn Jawzi has this very beautiful understanding of what ikhlas is. He says ikhlas is about turning hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning when I do something, when I learn something, when I engage someone, my goal is to turn my heart and their heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now it goes in line with what Abu Ismail al-Harawi is saying, because when you turn someone's heart to Allah, it means they're doing what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their heart is more attached to Allah. But I feel like Ibn Jawzi's description of ikhlas is easy to engage, right? Why am I going to the masjid? Why am I coming to this class? Well, because I want my heart to be that much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? If you're talking in a group and you're mentioning Allah and His Messenger, you're kind of reminding people of Allah and His Messenger, you're doing that because you want their hearts to be turned to Allah, not turned to me. Right? Because that's really the challenge. The third element of the average Muslim's spiritual exercise is tawfir al-huquqi fil muamala, is fulfilling the rights, or fulfilling rights in your dealings with others. So we know what the word rights means, right? It's a very popular word here in our context. And in fiqh, rights are categorized into two types: the rights of Allah and the rights of the servants of Allah, meaning human beings. The goal here is to exercise ourselves, our spirituality, to where we become very consistent in offering and giving people their due rights. Whether that's the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to worship, He has the right to be worshipped in what we call salah, 5 times a day, in their proper times. In Ramadan, He has the right to be worshipped through the worship of fasting. Every year, Allah has the right that we give zakah, right? And once in our lifetime, it's His right that we do hajj, among other things. That we only talk about Allah with reverence. We do not ascribe to Allah what is not befitting to Allah, nor do we reject Allah that which is His. We describe Allah the way He describes Himself, right? We don't start carving an image of Allah based on what satisfies our own biases, right? So those who go around and say Allah is a she, we can call God with the feminine pronoun, right? Why? Because God has no gender and that's okay. Fine, God doesn't have a gender. No Muslim is going to say that. But how did Allah refer to Himself? In the He, right? Not because He's a male. But Allah chose that pronoun for Himself. And we don't have the right to call Him other than the way He called Himself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala severely criticizes and threatens those who ascribe to Allah that which is not befitting to Him. وَذَرُوا الَّذِينَ يُلْحِدُونَ فِي أَسْمَائِهِ. Just wait for those who are discriminating, or no, not discriminating, those who are misusing His names or taking away that which is befitting to Him. Just wait, they're going to get it. They're going to get it bad, right? So we refer to Allah the way He refers to Himself, because that's the way He chose. And the Prophet ﷺ says, "La uhsi thana'an alayk anta kama athnayta ala nafsik." I cannot fully understand your praise. You are as you praised yourself. So the best way to praise Allah and to refer to Him is the way He referred to Himself. And it's really interesting because the people who go around promoting this, God is a she and whatnot, they tend to be those pro gender fluidity and transgender and all this stuff. A person has the right to choose their own identity, but Allah doesn't have the right. God doesn't have the right to choose His own. We're going to choose it for Him. What a contradiction, subhanAllah. So those are some of the rights of Allah and the rights of human beings, individuals. There's a lot to say there, but one I would like to mention is the right of advice, nasiha. That it is the right of a fellow human being that you advise them in that which is benefiting to them, right? That we do not harm others by not advising them, and we advise them to what is beneficial to them. Even, I get this a lot. I know someone who's doing something wrong, right? But I know if I advise them, they're gonna have a very negative reaction to me. And my response to them is sometimes you have to take the punch, right? Because that is the compassion. That is compassion. The Prophet ﷺ, was abused. Abu Jahl took the intestines of a dead camel and tied it around the Prophet ﷺ's neck, right? Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ had that compassion, right, and was willing to take the punch in order to advise them to what is beneficial to them, better for them, right? So part of giving others their rights, everyone has the right to be informed, right? Even if that leads to being hurt, physically or emotionally. Now, you can see how perfecting one's characteristics, dealing with one another, perfecting or purifying one's actions with ikhlas. Ikhlas is about putting yourself aside, right? Your primary concern isn't yourself, and you might lose out on some things. When you give zakah and give charity, you're losing out. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not losing out. And that's not always easy. Doing hajj, it's not always easy. Dealing with other people, it's not always easy. Likewise, giving people their rights, right? Sometimes you have to say an honest word, and that's going to harm you. It's going to be not the best outcome for you. But it's the right of the other person, and I have to honor that. It's not always easy. So Ibn Qayyim is now then saying that exercising your spirituality, since it is very burdensome on the self, exercising these elements of your spirituality is not easy, and you're going to feel that burn when you exercise. Same thing when you exercise, right? The first time you run after not running for 10 years, it's not fun. Even afterwards, even if you are a professional runner or a marathon runner, when you're running, you feel that, right? It's not a good feeling, but you're doing that because it's strengthening yourself. But if you are consistent in doing that, right, your exercise becomes part of you. Your practices become part of your manners, part of your character. Doing something once does not mean that you have that characteristic. Meaning someone who is generous in one sitting does not make them a generous person. But if someone is constantly giving, anywhere they have the opportunity to give, whatever amount they can, right? They're constantly doing that, then they become a generous person. So this is the idea of spiritual exercise. You practice it, and you become consistent in your practice to where that practice becomes part of you, and you can be characterized with that adjective. So that's the idea here. And then the second level is Riyadatul Khassa, the spiritual exercise of the above average Muslims, and that is حسم التفرق وقطع الالتفات إلى المقام الذي جاوزه وإبقاء العلم يجري مجراه. This is beautiful. I really like this. It's interesting because it really talks to a student of knowledge and someone who's really trying to become better. And that is the three elements, حسم التفرق. That is cutting off that which causes you to be all over the place, to put it in simple terms, right? Sometimes we are, in fact, many of us, if not all of us, we're all over the place. I have my kids to take care of when I get home. I have to cook. I have to clean. I have to go run these errands. I have this. I have salah. We're all over the place, right? And that really, although we might be able to get it all done, it's an ineffective way of building yourself, right? So when a person is trying to study, for example, and they have it's a finals weeks and they have 5 finals, right? what is the best studying practice? Is it to study 1 hour this and the next hour that subject and the third hour this and then go back to here, this randomness? Absolutely not. You start off, study one, right? Get that done. And then use it, review as you go along. Then study the next one, right? Etc. And that keeps you focused. So part of exercising your spirituality is making a schedule, a routine for yourself that really focuses your energy and your concentration on a particular task so that you can really engage it in a way that's going to build you, right? And sometimes that is, okay, for 2 hours, the first 2 hours of my day, I'm going to dedicate that to reading, right? I'm going to read, and I'm just going to read. Turn off my phone, turn off, go in my office, away from it, I'm just going to read. That's how you build yourself. But if you are reading and you're getting messages and you're checking your emails, that's really going to drain your ability and your concentration. And when it comes to spirituality, making sure your heart is focused. And that requires an amount of training. How can we cause our hearts to be focused? And someone gave a very beautiful example. How can you improve your khushu', your focus in salah? And the analogy is as follows. Before a team, let's say, a soccer team starts their match, what do? Just practice. Right before the match, what do? They warm up, right? They warm up. They start stretching. They start kicking the ball. They warm up, right? Well, before praying, warm up. Sit down, right? Turn off your phone. Make wudu. That's part of the wisdoms of doing wudu. You're getting your mind in tune. And you do dhikr. Remember Allah. Remember the Day of Judgment. You're warming up now so that when salah comes, you've put aside all of your worries and your stresses and your business, right? And now you're focusing on salah. You warm up. And the exercise here is, the vision here is that we continue to exercise our heart, and by making sure our heart is united, we find ways and strategies to learn how to focus and concentrate to where our heart becomes completely and entirely focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? How can we kind of imagine that? Imagine your emotions. At any one moment, you could be feeling a lot of emotions, right? Now you take all of those emotions and you focus them towards Allah. You're sad because of, something that you heard, someone passed away, someone passed away. And you are concerned because there is an exam coming, and you're worried about your kids, and you're happy because next week is a wedding of someone dear to you. Whatever, you have all of these emotions. You start taking them one by one and start focusing them on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second element is قطع الالتفات إلى المقام الذي جاوزه, is not looking back to a lesser station. Okay, we've gone through a few stations. We've gone through the yaqadha and whatnot. We've gone basira, tawbah, firar, others, right? Inaba. We've gone through these stations. What does Ibn Qayyim mean here? He doesn't mean reviewing these stations to where you're reminding yourself of some of the practices. We're not going to memorize everything, nor are we going to be able to apply everything that we've learned all at once. It requires going back and reminding yourself of these things, and you start taking bit by bit. But what Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala means here is that, or what Ibn Abu Ismail al-Harawi rahimahullah means here, is that what happens sometimes in Sufi groups, right, is the following. There is one particular station they really like, and they just stick to it, not because, for iman reasons, right, but because they're too lazy to go beyond it. Does that make sense? I feel comfortable here. I don't want to go beyond it. That's it. So they stick in. For example, some people, they start a career, right? And they like their position. And for 20 years, they're in the same exact position. They don't get any promotions. Well, I feel comfortable here. That's not something to be proud of, right? And learning is always, a lot of learning has a lot to do with putting yourself in places that is uncharted terrain for you, right? If you're always in a bubble and you feel comfortable, you're not going to get far. But putting yourself in uncomfortable situations will really develop your your knowledge, your insight, your wisdom, your character, right? And anyone who really has become a scholar, they've been in very, very uncomfortable situations. I mean, look at their stories, right? Some of these students of knowledge nearly died because of the hardships that they went through. You travel to another country, you're going to get sick. And sometimes those sicknesses are really bad, right? Anyone who's traveled for knowledge knows this. And in our times today, traveling to those countries, you're going from you're going to a lot lower standard of living, right? With a lot lower standards of regulations and whatnot. In Jordan, you'll find people smoking over the food that they're cooking for you. And the ashes it's disgusting, right? That's it. The water is tainted there. There's a lot that goes on. But it's because of that, because of having the courage of putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you gain so much, you learn so much. So what's meant by this is that you're constantly progressing in what you do. You're constantly looking at the next stage, right? And you're not getting too attached to what's in the past, right? And with time, you'll find that you'll be reminded of what you have already learned. But if we just stick to, for example, what happens with some people is they study fiqh, but they only study fiqh of ibadat, the acts of worship, that's it. You ask them anything outside of acts of worship, they know absolutely nothing. And they stick to one book, and that's it, right? You're not going to get far doing that. And this is a trap of the shaitan, and a trap of really it's laziness. It goes back to laziness. So, part of exercising is you're constantly going to the next level. You don't just choose, for example, 150 pounds to bench press and you just keep doing that year after year after year. No, you do that until your body gets used to it, and then you put some more weights on. And it's going to burden your body, and it's going to cause you to get sore maybe, right? But you're constantly pushing yourself. Okay, I can run a mile in 7 minutes, right? Back in the day. I can run a mile in 7 minutes. Oh, I'm just going to stick to that because I feel comfortable with that. No, you're going to push yourself. In the last, lap of your mile run, you're going to sprint. Well, it's not fun to sprint, right? And afterwards, you feel like garbage, right? But you're going to do that. Why? Because you're pushing yourself. And that's what knowledge is. You have to keep, and spirituality, you have to keep pushing yourself, right? And then finally, إبقاء العلم يجري مجراه. Oh, this is beautiful. I love this. Is allowing knowledge to flow its flow. Meaning, knowledge is what's flowing. You're not causing the knowledge to flow. Let me reword that. Knowledge is like a river. You let it flow. You don't try to stop it. And you flow with the river. You don't try to navigate it. That's what knowledge is. And anyone who has experienced reading, they read a book, right? And then this book will bring new ideas into your mind. And it might reference other books. And then you jump to the next topic based on what you learned here, all right? Or the ideas or the questions that you have in mind, or the books that were referenced. You go to the next one. And that kind of takes you on a path, right? You're allowing knowledge to guide you. You don't guide knowledge. Knowledge is above you and more powerful than the self. You're not the one dictating knowledge, right? That's part of learning. That's part of keeping you on the channel. Let the Quran guide you. Don't try and go against it. And put yourself in this image. It said if you go rafting, right, and you fall off the raft, they tell you don't stand up. Because if you stand up, you have a huge amount of force pushing. You're trying to stop a huge amount of force. It will crush you, right? Rather, lie on your back and let the river take you. Flow with the river, and you just try to navigate to avoid any rocks. Does that make sense? Right? Because if you try going against that river, it's going to crush you. But if you flow with the river, it'll take you. Same thing with Allah's qadar. Allah puts certain things in our path. We can't stop it. Flow with it. Don't try to stop it. Certain things are meant to happen, and they're going to happen. What happens is sometimes people try and go against the qadar, right? But it crushes them. Or in politics, if you see a big wave coming, right? A ineffective leader will try and go against it. But an effective leader is going to ride it, right? This is what Muawiyah radiallahu anh did. He saw where people are going. He understood the mentality is changing from the time of the companions. And he just learned how to manage it. And he was a very successful ruler. And he was very loved by his people, or the people of that time. So understanding that knowledge is something that takes you. You don't take knowledge. Your body is the way it is. When you exercise, you have to exercise in a way that's suitable for your body. Not try and invent exercises the way you want it and expect your body to work, and respond to it, right? So a big mistake, or a mistake that a lot of people trying to seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fall into, is staying in one particular station because it feels good, or being deceived by their feeling. Oh, this feels so good, right? I want to just stay here because it makes me feel good. Feeling good is not going to get you anywhere, right? Sometimes you feel good, but you have to sometimes feel bad in order to develop yourself. And the final level of spiritual exercise, the exceptional, I'm not going to go over it because Ibn Qayyim rejects it and it doesn't make sense. And we spoke about it in Tawbah. And it has this kind of this paradox here it's nonsensical, so I'm just going to skip it. And with that, we conclude the station of spiritual exercise. I love this one because it's such an interesting concept, right? It's something we accept that you exercise. Exercise is good for you. But we never think about exercising our spirituality. And it requires that. And it kind of gives us this type of motivation. Oh, you know what? I don't feel like getting up. Oh, I understand why. Not because I'm not a good Muslim or my iman is weak. See, we make this mistake sometimes, and a lot of inexperienced shuyukh and whatnot and teachers, they say this, if you can't get up, you have to strengthen your iman. You have to have this firmness in Allah. No, it could be just that you need to train yourself into waking up at a certain time, right, until your body gets used to it. Sometimes it's not that you're not a generous person. It's just that you need to train yourself to be generous. And I'll conclude with this. I remember when I was young, the community that I was in Chicago, they asked for a lot of donations, right? A lot. I mean, it'll be even overboard, but there's something interesting that I saw. Growing up and hearing all of these fundraisers and people raising their hands and giving, and I'd see my dad give, and it built in me this want, this longing. I want to donate. I can't wait till I start working so I can fill out one of those donation slips and give, right? It built that in me. But communities that aren't really doing this, right? You find a community that's not really, it's reluctant to give. I don't want to really give, and that you're asking for fundraisers. I feel offended, or you're offending other people and whatnot. And fine. There's a reasonable amount that a person, or a reasonable way of approaching this. But if we have that spirit of generosity, we won't really be bothered by it, right? So that requires an amount of exercise. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us these healthy spirituality, and give us the strength to exercise our iman. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.